Good morning, everyone. And I'll go ahead and get started here with the talk. And I'd like to acknowledge my colleague, Patrick Bose, my research specialist and the state IPM coordinator. Most of you are familiar with soybean aphid. It's a very small insect, about 1/8 of an inch long, light yellow. Some people like to call it mountain dew color. And it has two black cornicles or tailpipe coming off the back end for identification. And you'll note over here that there is some white cast skins of the aphids. And in order to grow, the young nymphs need to molt their skin, and they do that by casting it so they can grow larger. So they do feed on the phloem or the sap of the plant, and that is very rich in proteins. And then they excrete it as honeydew, and that then often when the populations are high, you'll get black sooty mold growing on where the honeydew excretions are, and the plants often look very shiny as well. So you have fairly high population if you see black sooty mold and that shiny sheen on the leaves. And as noted, soybean aphids have very fast reproduction. It's exponential reproduction. And in the lab where the temperature was kept constant at 83 degrees Fahrenheit, they were able to double their population within 2 to 3 days. Fortunately, in the field, we have lows and highs, so usually it takes about 5 to 7 days here in North Dakota to double their population, but it's still very quick. They overwinter as eggs on the buckthorn host, and this plant is not native to North America. It's from Asia, where the soybean aphid originated. And the tree is pretty common in North Dakota, especially in the river valleys and in tree rows. It's invasive, and it usually is a smaller tree or bush, and you'll see it late in the season. It's the one that still has the leaves on it and reddish to blackish berries. For scouting for soybean aphid, we recommend that you walk your M pattern or W, and then look at a total of 20 plants in the field. You would sample 5 plants at each location, or 4 plants at each location, and make sure you look at the whole plant when you're sampling. When the plant is young, the aphids are concentrated up in the upper foliage at the tip. But later on in the season, they start to move down lower because the protein in the plant is moving down. And then we usually calculate a incidence from the 20 plant, and you just sort of multiply times 10 to get an incidence, which is 100% would be the highest, and the threshold is 80% for the incidence. And then we calculate the average number of aphids per plant. And again, remember not to count those white cast skins. And then just calculate the average, divide by the 20 plants from the total number of aphids that you have counted. And you will see when you're out in the field, wingless and then winged aphids. If you're seeing a lot of winged aphids, that's a good indication that they just moved into the field and perhaps migrated from neighboring states or other areas of North Dakota. So that's kind of useful information to know if they just first arrived in the field versus they've been there several weeks and are established. And there's a soybean aphid scouting video that you can watch. There's a lot of predators, so keep your eyes open for predators when you're out scouting. This is probably one that is missed quite a bit. This is the aphid midge larvae, very tiny, headless, legless little larvae, and it is a voracious predator of soybean aphids and other species of aphids. Common out there. Some of the other common ones that we all recognize is the lady beetle adult and larvae, and all the red stars indicate the stage that feeds on the soybean aphids. So the caterpillar or the larvae, the immature stage, is often confused and people think it's a pest, but it kind of is alligator-like, and it eats over 200 aphids a day. And then the hoverfly is actually a beneficial and pollinator. So when it doesn't feed on the aphids, but it's in mature stage, the larvae does feed on aphids, all species. And then the lacewings is another thing you might see. Again, the adults don't feed on the aphids, but the larva stage does. And you can always recognize it by the sickle-shaped mandibles that it has protruding out of the head. And what they do is they grab that aphid and suck all the juices out of it, and then they'll discard the body. So there's parasitic wasps, or parasitoids, we call them, that attack soybean aphid. And then you'll see these white mummies on the plant. And again, make sure you don't accidentally count those, because those are dead. And they get puffy and balloon out. And then eventually you'll get a circular hole on where the wasp has emerged. And the larvae eat the aphid out from the inside. And then there's also a number of pathogens that attack aphids. There's they're probably the hardest to identify, but a lot of times they'll be bloated as well and kind of pussy growths extending out of the body. For the threshold, it's been well established now. We go all the way from all stages at the beginning to through R5, the start of seed set. And it's an average of 250 aphids per plant, and then 80% of the plants infested. That's your incidence. And we'd like to see populations increasing. Again, once you get to full seed set, the threshold will go up, and we haven't really established a threshold, because usually if we have aphids that are economic in the field, it'll occur in the earlier R4 or R5 stage, for example. And after maturity, we're no longer concerned about aphids, and usually they're starting to move out to the overwintering host buckthorn. So here's just shows you how much the aphid population fluctuates year to year, and it's very weather dependent. And in fact, during the drought, soybean aphid wasn't really an economically important pest for several years, really since 2017 or 18. It started to decline, and then in 2024 it started to come back. And 23 we saw some aphids, but again, not a lot of fields needed in treatment. So it varies, and that's why scouting is so important. Unfortunately, we did detect pyrethroid-resistant issues back in 2015 with soybean aphids. And then in North Dakota, we first had numerous complaints throughout the Red River Valley and eastern side of the state in North Dakota. And now it's pretty common in the eastern counties near the Red River Valley. So one of the negatives with the pyrethroid resistance is that, the cost of the fitness cost. So usually we see a decreased fitness when an insect develops resistant to an insecticide, but with the soybean aphid, we saw the opposite. The resistant phenotypes actually had a higher fitness, and they were also bigger. So they had a higher population increase reproductive rate. And this was published in the Journal of Economic Entomology. If you're interested, it's listed there below. So it's unfortunate, but if we continue on this road with spraying a lot of pyrethroids, we're just creating a super bug. And it's going to be a super aphid out there that you can spray as many pyrethroids 10 times as you want at it, but it's just going to get to be a bigger problem. So we can manage insecticide resistance using an integrated pest management approach, and we have a fact sheet that is available for you online. And the main thing gets down to knowing your pest, when is it present in the field, its biology, how fast does it reproduce, and how to scout for it, and then scout regularly, and then use the threshold. Because the threshold provides you with a guideline so you don't make unnecessary insecticide applications, and you conserve all those good insects, the natural enemies that help prevent soybean aphid populations from exploding. And in several of my insecticide trials, we've had the lady beetles especially move in quickly and take care of them, especially during lower population years. So then the main thing to do when you have insecticide resistance is to rotate your mode of action to a different insecticide class. And that will really help to control the soybean aphids. We're fortunate in soybeans to have several new modes of action: Transform WG 4C, Savanto Prime 4D, and then Safina 9D. So all of these are new modes of action. So we're adding these new tools to our toolbox. So we did a study this year at the Castleton Agronomy Farm, and all the ones in the red box are pyrethroids that we tested: Asana, Brigade, Warrior, Pyrethroid, and Hero. Hero is actually a combination of two different pyrethroids, beta-cypermethrin and bifenthrin. And then we have what I'm going to call combinations, where you got two different active ingredients. We did Ridgeback, Indigo ZC, Renestra, and Leverage 360. And then at the end, I have the aphid specifics, is what I'm going to call them: the Transform WG, Safina, and Savanto Prime. And then, of course, the untreated check. And we used the standard higher rate that was labeled for soybean aphid control. So here's the results for treatment means for soybean aphids per plant. And as you can see in the red box where the pyrethroids are, we were all above the economic threshold. The red line there shows you the economic threshold level, 250 aphids per plant on average. And then you can see it was above, not as high as the untreated check over on your right, but it still was, significant. When you get above that 250, you're going to start the yield loss eventually. So that gives you a week to get that spray out. So then the combinations, you can see the soybean aphid populations were very low. And you can hardly see the bars on the table. And the specific, again, very low. And I've had a lot of questions about these aphid specifics on whether they're going to hold. And we tested them out to 19 days after treatment. So we had very low numbers even after 19 days. So we only sprayed once. So the same with the combinations. Many of these combinations has some of the aphid specific products in them, and also some neonicotinoids. So here's the treatment means for yield. And again, you can see the pyrethroids are much lower, down in the 30s. And combination of aphid specifics were up in the 40s. The untreated check was only 24.8. So significant differences. The pyrethroids not be quite as bad as no treatment, but still not good. And then the specific and combinations both provided great control. So in here, if we look at the regression correlation between cumulative aphid days and yield, you can see the untreated check was lowest, the pyrethroids came out in the middle, and then the aphid specific combinations were way at the top with the highest yield. And here, if we want to look at just the yield and grouping all the different groups together, treated pyrethroid aphid specific, we can see the aphid specific did do the best. And here's the breakout. This one pyrethroid is only 7 bushels higher than the untreated check. Aphid specific 18 bushels, and then the combination 17 bushels. So again, these products are excellent. So what about the economics? I always get the verbiage that they're too expensive to use these aphid-specific products. I'd rather just stick with my pyrethroid or pyrethroid usually. So here you can see the cost of soybean, and then the crop value based on the yield that we obtained, mean yield. And then if we incorporate in the insecticide costs, this is total cost for that application rate. You can see that our top 3 highest were Sabina and Sabina and Renestra. So the other ones in the combination and aphid specific were not that far behind. In the yield, we were all in the 400s. If we look up at the pyrethroids, you can see our for cost $200 to $300, and the untreated was only $245. So it does pay, even though that insecticide might cost you more, you're still going to end up with more money in your pocket. So the take-home message is, use those aphid-specific products for soybean aphids, especially if you think you have pyrethroid resistance. And this year I got some calls further west than I expected, with farmers complaining about the pyrethroids and soybean aphid control. So I know it's moving further west. And then use a combination or the pyrethroids for other insect pests that might be out in your soybean field, especially when the soybean aphids are low or absent, or you don't have any soybean aphids that year. For grasshopper, foliage feeding caterpillars, and bee leaf beetle, use some of those other modes of action, the combination or the pyrethroids then. But we don't want to aggravate resistance in the soybean aphid and increase it. So avoid using pyrethroids, if you have significant populations above the economic threshold. So just a quick update on chlorpyrifos for use in 2025. I just received this morning an email that EPA has proposed a ruling to revoke tolerances for all the crops except 11 crops specifically listed in the 2020 proposed interim decision. So those crops include alfalfa, soybean, sugar beet, wheat, spring and winter wheat. So you can then comment on this in the following website in February 2nd. So, and you can go to the Kelly registration system, North Dakota Department of Ag, at the following site, and you can see what products are registered, and I've listed most of them that we found for our insect guide. So, and here's some of the resources you have available, and you can obtain them at the following link there. And also, so feel free to access these publications. And happy to take any questions if there's time.